but young ladies are inclined to defy what others deem fit. His eyes met little Isla's, who was sitting at the very back. Her small body was practically swallowed up by the cushion, which was not much larger than her. "Why was she there again?" asked Cedric, who had nodded off toward the end of the story last time. "She'd sneaked out. She took the path through the tunnel and ended up in the forest," said Isla. "The tunnel?" asked Cedric. "You really never pay any attention," said Isla, and recapped where the story had come to an end last time. "She went all the way down to where they hang the washing up. There's a door there. It's usually closed, but Noah can pick the lock with a hairpin. That's where the tunnel starts, and she had to make herself very small in order to fit through it. It was pitch black, but that doesn't matter because she can see in the dark, too. And then she emerged into the woods, which were deserted because nobody wanders around there. It's much too dangerous, but she doesn't care. Then she began to run, and that's where we stopped." Isla rattled off the words so quickly she could barely catch her breath. "What a good memory you have," said Posman, placing an extra piece of chocolate onto her plate. "Let's continue." The man held his cup in his hands, warmed his fingers and closed his eyes to help him remember how his story continued. "Where's the book?" asked a boy named Eric. It was his first time there that day. Isla had told him the man's story in great detail at breakfast, so he would be able to follow along. "The book?" asked Posman. "You're telling us this long story, but you must have a book you're reading it out from," said Eric. "I don't need one. It's all up here," said Posman, pointing his finger to his temple. He looked at Isla, who was already fidgeting around excitedly on the cushions, watching him with eyes full of anticipation. "So, you're just making the story up?" asked Eric, warily. The man smiled. "My son, just because the story has not been written down does not mean it's not true. You will see there are still many truths waiting to be discovered." The children did not interrupt him further, and thus he could continue to transport himself and his listeners to another world, to a place far away from this home, where forsaken children found new lives, far away from the reality in which they lived. So, she was now in the forest. You have to understand, it wasn't like the one we have here. There were no conifers or giant fir trees. The forest in which our Noah found a home for herself was filled with trees that were much greener, much taller, and much more majestic. There were bushes with leaves as big as your heads. If you folded one up into a small vessel, you could even drink from it. There were plants that took root beside a tree and then grew upwards, winding themselves around the trunk all the way to the top. Then it looked like they were trying to keep it steady. Strange, isn't it? As though a tree could just fall down. The earth was dark brown, but when Noah buried her fingers into it and dug a little beneath the surface, the soil appeared golden yellow and glittered in the sunlight. The treetops were heavy with nests. In fact, there were more birds in this forest than you can imagine, and they came in all sorts of shapes and colors. Most were adorned with dark green feathers, which allowed them to remain hidden in the treetops. You could only hear their song, which began at sunrise. Other birds had vibrant blue plumage draping their bodies like a king's robes, which they displayed to the world with just as much pride. And then there was also a very rare little bird, barely bigger than your hands. Its feathers were a vivid orange hue. When this bird was perched in a mandarin tree, it could hide amongst the fruit. It was the only bird that did not sing. Quite the opposite. It would not utter a single peep throughout its entire life unless it found the most beautiful place where it wanted to stay forever. Only then would it open its little beak and warble a short song. "Have you ever seen one?" asked Isla. "In a lifetime. Long before this one. Yes. Yes, I have. And I will never forget."